Hello, welcome to the corner and my treadmill. I felt like having some books in my view and maybe getting a little bit of a different view for a change in these vlogs. So yeah, sitting on my treadmill, which is actually relevant to what I'm going to say in this vlog. But first, let me introduce myself in case you haven't watched any of my videos before and you're new to this channel. I'm Julianne and I am currently in the middle of a project to read every single unread book that I own. I have a lot of unread books, to put it mildly. This shelf and the shelf below it on this bookcase are all unread books, and then I have a whole 4x4 IKEA kallax that's almost entirely full of unread books. Actually, there's like one with a bunch of gardening books, which I guess are more reference, and there's one cube with like a bunch of like diaries and planners and things, which I could probably like downsize. That has only just occurred to me. But anyway, and I also have books at my parents' house. And I moved out of my parents' house. Ooh, where are we? 9 years ago at this point? It's a lot, and it's a slow process, but I am documenting it here for your benefit. And I have made some progress. The video before this one was talking about a rule change. So at the start of this project, I decided that every time I had read 50 physical books from my TBR, that I could change the rules. And so after attempting a whole bunch of different and not very strict and not very motivating rules for the first 50, for the second 50, I have a rule in place that I have to read one book that I own for every book that I read that I don't own. So if I want to read a audio or ebook from the library, if I want to read a book from NetGalley, if I want to read a book, listen to a book on Spotify, then I must have read a physical TBR book in order to earn it. The only exception is Audible audiobooks from the Plus catalogue, which I can read as many of as I want and try to read as many of as I can, because I want to be able to cancel my Audible subscription sometime this year. So here we are, a new month, and I am on day 4, I think, and so far I have read 2 print books. So first of all, I finished Love Walked In. This is a sort of, I guess it's a sort of like, it's kind of romantic, but it's not just about romantic love. It's about familial love and about friendship and that kind of love. And yeah, it's one of those books that's very like kind of quirky, almost whimsical in a way, but it tackles some serious issues at the same time, and there were bits where I thought, is this too whimsical for me, is this like a bit too much, but then I cried at the end. So yeah, and I'm really intrigued to read the second one. I didn't realise when I picked this up this was a series. I thought it was a standalone. I was hoping it was a standalone because I didn't want to read a book that then created more books that I need to read, but because it was so strange, and because I'm still not entirely sure how I felt about it, I really want to read the next one to see how I feel about that. I'm intrigued. And the other book I read was 1,000 Perfect Notes by C.G. Drews, which is about a boy whose mother forces him to learn the piano and practice the piano because she was once a great famous pianist, but after a stroke can no longer play well, and so she's put all of her hopes and dreams on him and is abusive about it, and he doesn't see a way out until he meets this girl called August at school, who becomes his friend, and then something more, and kind of helps him to develop some self-respect, I guess, and self-esteem. And it's an Illumicrate book from the current quarter, so I have this plan to kind of read through my log of books from Illumicrate, which is a subscription box, and I am kind of doing it on a quarterly basis because I have varying numbers of books that I've read from all the previous months. So I only have 7 books to read for this quarter, so that's from April, May and June in previous years. So having read one of those makes me feel pretty good and motivated to read more. But that was probably the shortest book on the Illumicrate pile, so yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I am at the moment, when it comes to physical books, reading All the Range by Courtney Summers, which I started yesterday. This is a proof copy from 2016, but in my defence, I don't think this was originally my proof copy. I think another book blogger gave this to me, so I feel like I'm off the hook for that one. I am going to start reading A Power Unbound, which is the 3rd in the series. It started with A Marvellous Light soon as well, but I am just trying to always have a paperback on the go because I've discovered I can read paperbacks whilst on the treadmill. Exciting new life development. So that helps me read them faster. I also have from Spotify the vintage shop in Notting Hill, basically a little vintage shop in Notting Hill, or the vintage dress, I think it's the vintage dress shop in Notting Hill by Annie Darling, which I have been listening to off and on for a couple of weeks now. I've kind of stopped and listened to other things and come back to it, which I'm trying not to listen to too fast because it will count as one of my one of my non-TBR books when I finish it. So yeah. I am 1 TBR book ahead now, so I'm going to start one of the graphic novels that I got from NetGalley. So I will tell you about that probably in my next update. Hello, I'm back on the treadmill to do a little update of where I am. It's about a week later, and I have finished 3 paperbacks. So exciting. So I read All the Rage after I last mentioned it, and it's quite hard-hitting, kind of quite bleak and depressing for a lot of the storybook. It's a hard read because it's about sexual assault and the aftermath of that, and a community which isn't supportive of the main character for various reasons. She's kind of an outsider, and even the few people she had turn away from her because they believe she's made a false accusation. So it was a tough one, but really, really well written, really compelling, and yeah, I enjoyed it, if that's not too odd a thing to say. So next up, I finished reading The Vampire Tapestries. This book had been on my currently reading for years because it was my bag book, and the trouble is it wasn't compelling enough to be a bag book. I would find myself listening to audiobooks rather than picking this up, or looking at social media rather than picking this up. There were parts of it which were interesting and more page turning, but also there were long periods where not all that much happened. And it was just sort of building up the portrait of the main character very, very slowly. And it was kind of like a little bit like, I get it. Now I'd like to move on to the next bit, but then we still had pages and pages and pages of that section to go. So this is a book about a vampire, and what is really brilliant about it is it's sort of like a realistic look at how a vampire would live, act, maintain an identity if they were to exist. It doesn't really delve into mythology. He drinks blood in order to survive and is a predator, but otherwise can walk in the sunlight, and is immune to, the typical things that might kill a vampire. However, he isn't immortal, so he can die. If someone attacked him hard enough, he would die. So he has to keep the fact that he's a vampire secret. He's never met another vampire. As far as he knows, he's the only one. He thinks of himself as sort of like a superior species, but at the same time, as this book explores, he has some sort of longings for human life, and he does go about human life in a way that gets him some sort of typical markers of success. You know, he fits into a society and he works towards the goals that people in that society would consider valuable. So at the start of the book, he is an academic. He's a professor, and he basically tends to feed on his young female students. It does some more of that later on in the book. But there's a South African woman who I think is the wife of one of the other faculty members, who just kind of picks up on what he is. And one thing leads to another. He ends up kind of getting run out of town for a while. He's captured. Then he tries to get his old life back by seeing a therapist. And yeah, it's different sections as he encounters different people, and kind of follows the impact that they have on him and his decisions in the end. But yeah, I just felt like there was too much of some of the sections and I lost interest, and so that's why, unfortunately, it took me so long to read. But I have finished it now. I have finished it. It was interesting enough that I wanted to keep going. It's just that I wasn't kind of captured by it. I didn't find it page-turning enough to want to pick it up when I was out and about, unfortunately. So yeah, I should have probably realised this early on and made a home book rather than a bag book and switched it out for something else, but there we go. And I've already picked a different bag book. I'm reading this book called Come Thou Tortoise, which, as far as I can tell so far, and I'm quite early on, is a sort of split narrative about a woman who is travelling home to her ill father's bedside, and the tortoise she's left at home, or with some friends to look after him. Her, rather. I think she's a her. Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of it's a split narrative and it's strange and surreal, but I'm intrigued enough to pick that one up, I think, while I'm out and about. But we'll see how we go. Might have to switch it to a home book if it's just not that compelling. Like, a bag book really needs to be compelling, I find. And then I started reading Who Runs the World by Virginia Bergin. I finished this today, and I absolutely loved this. So this is a proof copy that I got secondhand. It came out 2017. I have not read any books by Virginia Bergin before. My partner, however, did read and really enjoy The Rain, and I think the sequel as well, which was her first and second book. So this is her third book. I have rarely seen a book get such Marmite reviews on Goodreads. So I finished this, I loved this, I went on Goodreads to see what other people thought, and it was just like, wow, there were so few kind of in the middle reviews, right? Everything was either 1 star or 4 or 5 stars. And so I want to start talking about this book by saying that if you don't read books aimed at early teens, or you don't usually like books aimed at early teens, then you may not like this. And I went for a walk earlier, and as I was walking around, I was reflecting on kind of early teen as an age category, and it's often one where I see these kind of reviews that really kind of lay into how childish they think the main character is, like they don't like use of slang, that kind of thing, and I feel like those people aren't reading the book in the spirit that it was written. And I think early teen is actually a really hard category to write for, because unlike middle grade, where you can have kind of these plucky young heroes who are kind of naive about the world, but kind of morally secure, and they're still sort of like exploring the world, and they don't have kind of preconceptions about it. When you're writing early teens, you really have to take those preconceptions into consideration, which is what I think this book does brilliantly. The main character is a real teenager. She's a realistic teenager. She's naive. She's optimistic. She's self-centered. She is led by her hormones. There's this whole bit where she refers to herself as hormones rather than by her own name or in the first person, because she feels like she's being taken over by her hormones. And I just think it's beautifully realistic to what it's like to be in those early teen years where you are kind of struggling as your conception of the world is being challenged, as you're starting to learn probably that it's not as safe as you always thought it was, and you're kind of like getting your own sort of first stabs towards independence and who you'll be as an adult. I just wanted to get that out there because, yeah, if early teen is not for you, this book is probably not going to be for you because it's very early teen. The other thing I loved about this, apart from the kind of early teenness of it all, which I really, really enjoyed, is that it is a post-apocalyptic utopia with a problem. Now, obviously, pure utopias are unrealistic, and, you know, reading a book that was just describing a utopia would be boring. But this one has a problem. So in the world of this book, 60 years ago, all people with XY chromosomes started to get ill and died. And as a result, the world is run by people with XX chromosomes. I say people because at the start of this book, the main character has no conception of herself like as a girl, and of the other people around her as women. Everybody is just a person, really. And it's only in relation to men as a man suddenly appears in her life, or rather a boy, as she realises once her grandmother gets involved, that she starts to think of herself in relation to something else, and she doesn't really know how to do it, you know, because she's always just thought of herself as being like everybody else. Trans men are mentioned in this book a couple times. There isn't a trans man character kind of on screen, but yeah, that they are referred to, so they are part of this world. Trans women, you kind of have to guess from the way the sanctuaries are that they are not doing too well. So our main character is growing up in this world of just people, and has always just thought of herself as a person. And one day she's out in the woods with the apple cart, and suddenly there is a boy. And she's terrified because in her mind, men are associated with the way the world was before. So after this apocalyptic event, the whole political system just kind of fell apart. Everything fell apart. Half the world vanished, and a new, let's say, more progressive political system based on communities and representatives was developed, and you can see some really interesting progressive political ideas are made real in this book, and I loved that as well. It was really interesting to see these kind of alternative systems of government and justice explored in this book. That was really fun, and so lovely to see in a book for young teens. So yeah, the book kind of explores the implosion of the existence of living boys and men, but also reveals a kind of possible dark secret at the heart of how everything's working in their utopian society. But what I really loved about this is it only gets so dark. It still has an optimism and hope, and essentially it is a post-apocalyptic utopia, and it does explore how to make the world better, and I really love that. So yeah, I've talked about this book for ages, but I did really, really enjoy it. It was one of those times where I finished a book and I'm like, I want to tell the author. Does anybody else get that impulse? I think now with so much access to the creators of works online, it's just so tempting to send someone an Instagram message and go, I loved your book, I loved your book. So there we go. Having finished that, I needed to pick a new paperback, so I looked at my shelves, and from here, I think, I plucked out The Female Man by Joanna Russ, and I think it's because of all of the kind of really lovely explorations of what it would mean to live in a society where people don't have to worry about gender stereotypes. Yeah, I just wanted to read something else that was about gender. And so, yeah, I picked up The Female Man. I am only a few pages in. Yeah. Page 11. There we go. And I'm really intrigued by it so far. Yeah, it's described as a remarkable novel, and I had read another novel. Well, it was a novella, I think, really, by Joanna Russ. Last year or the year before, I can't remember which. I think it's called For We Who Are About To, or something like that. I'll put it up on the screen because I don't have my phone here to check. I did not do that. But yeah, really excited to finally get around to this one. And I love it when I kind of create a bit of a thematic link between books that I'm reading in a row. Like, what can I read after this? There is stuff kind of jumping out at me already, so yeah, this is going to be fun. Hopefully I'll finish that in just a couple of days and can let you know what I thought. On the audiobook front, I just finished the Vintage Dress Shop in Notting Hill by Annie Darling. I really enjoyed the Lonely Hearts Bookshop series. They're kind of like light romances, like if you like hate angst in your romances, these are the books for you, because they're all just sort of like quite gentle. There is no like third act breakup. And so yeah, if you just want something kind of chill and relaxing and with lots of lovely little details about lifestyles, this is definitely the author for you. I did not like the Vintage Dress Shop in Notting Hill quite as much as I liked the bookshop series, but I can tell that I'm going to love the rest of the books in the series just as much. I think it's just because the protagonist for this first one does not like vintage dresses. Like, she ends up working in the shop because her dad owns it, and it just like has to have like a vintage dress education and grumbles about going to museums. And I'm like, I love vintage dresses and museums, so I'm excited to see to read books from the other characters at the shop's point of view, because yeah, I feel like I will have more kind of more in common with them. Hello, it is now the next month, May, and I have my final update for you for this vlog. So I feel like the headline is that I did not like The Female Man. I was so excited to read it finally, and like totally on a high from Who Runs the World. And yeah, no, I did not like it at all. It was a very strange, I guess literary is probably the way to put it, sci-fi book. Nothing was ever like fully explained. You just kind of left a load of breadcrumbs. There was a lot of sections where it wasn't clear who the narrator was, and it did all kind of come together at the end, and then I hated it. So yeah, I did not like that book. But it's off my TBR now. I never have to read it again. And I can, you know, I've read it, so I can talk about it with people if it ever comes up. You know, that's all I wanted, really. I would prefer to enjoy the books I'm reading, but we can't have everything, can we? On the positive side, though, and speaking of enjoyment, I did thoroughly enjoy System Collapse by Martha Wells, which is the most recent of the Murderbot series. Absolutely loved it. I just want Martha Wells to keep writing the series forever and to keep putting out more books in it, because I love them. I love them all. I love Murderbot. I love art. I love their people. Yeah, I'm very pleased with that. I can't really say much about it without spoiling like a large quantity of the series, but yeah, great, excellent book, much better series. And then I read The Midwinter Witch, which is the third in the series that began with The Witch Boy. And it sort of kind of carries on it's kind of the main character's journey, but also the new character who was introduced in the second one. If you've read the second one, I don't want to spoil that, especially because it's a graphic novel. You know, like a spoiler can kind of take up a large quantity of the book because they're not very long. But yeah, I really enjoyed that as well. To be honest with you, the whole rest of the month was great because I then followed that up by listening to How to Do Nothing on Audible, which was fantastic. Absolutely deserves all the hype that it's got. Brilliant book. As someone who loves thinking about community, the central message of the book that we should kind of resist the dopamine rushes of social media, etc., and the demands for our attention, and focus our attention on things that we really find meaningful and that allow us to connect with the world, with other people, with nature, etc. Yeah, loved it. Great message. Would recommend this book. It's such an easy listen as well because it's so it combines kind of like research with autobiographical material. So the author is kind of pulling in historical research and talks about art projects that I love. It was like kind of being back at my old job when I worked at an arts university. For a moment there, like hearing about all of this stuff through this book, and yeah, it was just really lovely, and I would highly recommend. And then I listened to Jade's Shards, which is a collection of short stories set in the world of the Greenbone Saga by Fonda. I absolutely loved the Greenbone Saga, and so honestly, I was so hyped for listening to the short story collection, and I loved every second. Like just being back in that world with those characters who I'd grown so attached to, and whose stories I just felt so passionately about was just amazing. I would recommend it. If you haven't read the Greenbone Saga, then get on it. And if you have, and you haven't listened to or read Jade Shards, you would just have a wonderful time. Go for it. So now we're on to the part that you've all been waiting for, my April tally. I have been very successful this month. I'm really pleased with how it's gone. I have read 6 books from my physical TBR. Great, excellent, A++. Would read again, except for The Female Man, which no, would not read again. But I've read it now, and that's the main thing. 1 book from NetGalley, and 5 library ebooks / audiobooks, which is great. That's kind of what I was expecting to get through some of those, so I'm really pleased with that. 1 book on Spotify, that was the Vintage Dress Shop in Notting Hill, and 1 book on Audible, which is not great for me getting through the Audible catalogue. But I have a plan for the next month. So there are a whole bunch of books that expire partway through the month that I'm going to try and focus on, and try and at least get a good chunk of those read, because there's a deadline, so that will push me on to do it. So there we go. I think that was a really good month. Obviously not as exciting as getting 50 books read and doing a rule change, which I did quite recently, but for a new month, kind of under the new regime of alternating books, I'm really happy with how it's gone, and I feel good. So yeah. If you would like to see if I continue to feel pleased with my progress and to make said progress, please do subscribe, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, or how your TBR project is going if you are doing one too. You'll see me again soon. Bye!